If it's not on Zorts, it doesn't count. You don't go to Google. You go right to Zorts. Like, get ranked on the biggest global ranking system that exists in this sport right now, you know? All right, we're here today with Zorts Sports. I'm here with Otis to my right, and we are here to discuss what the Zorts rankings actually are. My name is Matt Riemel. I am the head of football operations here at Zorts Sports.
And I'm Otis Fisher. I actually also started here in August. I have more of a background in physics and math. I'm currently doing biophysics research, and I'm working towards doing nuclear research. And I'm focusing more on just like the ranking system and the actual algorithm stuff and the math behind it to make sure that it makes sense for people involved and to make sure that it's fair and accurate.
I mean, based on all of the feedback that we've gotten from, you, the users, we felt the need to bring someone at Otis's level into the platform that really, can dive into the nitty gritty of making sure that everyone is getting awarded the proper amount of points, or the competition that they're playing, is weighted and all of that. So we're going to talk about a lot of that today and how the points work, the difference from last year's rankings to the new Global Power Index. We're going to cover a lot today, and hopefully you will get something out of, or it'll answer some of your questions you may have about the new systems and some of the new things we're doing here at Zorts. Last year, we only had one system with just sevens and just flag showing these are your rankings. Now we have moved towards a Zorts points earning, list. And this is where you are ranked on that list. This is how many you've earned. And then we have the Global Power Index, which is new and I'm really excited about. And, that's where I would say there's more human element, right? So we take the Zorts points list, and then a panel, a board of directors from all over the nation, several members meet once a month to review, all right, where does everyone sit in the Zorts points ranking right now, but what other human knowledge do we know, right? Let's say, the number 7th team has only gone to a few tournaments, maybe because they're from a certain part of the country that doesn't offer as many, or they don't travel as much, anything like that. But they just went to a tournament this weekend and they beat the number 1 and number 2 team. I would say it's safe to assume that when those global power rankings come out, that 7th ranked team in the Zorts points may actually be number 1 on our power rankings, right? So Zorts points is, built by the system, awards points. The Global Power Index is taking points into consideration with some human element from a panel, of judges to determine where we think the ranks belong in the power ranking. As you all know, if it's not on Zorts, it doesn't count. But the more tournaments you go to, the more points you will earn. Right. So that's just one big thing that everyone needs to be aware of is, if the tournament is not on our platform, it doesn't exist to us. Our system does not pick that up. And that's why, we have such a great community here, so many events in 5s and 7s. We're just blowing up. The numbers are unreal for the amount of events that we are, hosting every weekend, year round. It's just incredible. But you have to be on the platform or it's not going to count.
Yeah, I mean, I need the data for how well your team performed. If I don't know that you won an event, then I can't, take that into account when I'm calculating the rankings. I literally don't know. There's no way for us to know. So you have to do it at a Zorts event. You have to make sure that we know that you performed well, we know that you won.
There are 3 pathways in the new global rankings. 7-on-7 football, which includes various age divisions and girls 7-on-7 football. And that season starts at the first of the year, right? So any events from January 1, 2026 and on through into the summer will be that ranking system recording Zorts points. Essentially, it's what most of our users consider the 7-on-7 season. We will go from January all the way into June, and then we will post the Zorts points weekly for that division. And then every fourth week, we will have our global power index. And that's, going to be a discussion we talk about later today here. So that's one pathway. The other pathway, both of the next two shift over to flag, right? The 5-on-5 specific flag with two different cutoffs. A lot of our users out there use either an August 1st age cutoff or they use a January 1st age cutoff, right? So a little bit different. A lot of the, if you're born in somewhere in the first portion of the year, you might not be eligible for the August cutoff, or if you are born later in the year, you're not qualifying for, well, you qualify for the 1-1 cutoff no matter what. But we wanted to separate those paths so teams can be in both, and many of our teams will be ranked in both because a lot of our participants do go to 1-1 tournaments and 8-1 tournaments. So you're going to hear a lot of discussions about 1-1 cutoff, 8-1 cutoff. Just know that that's what we're referring to when we're going through the explanation. So let's start with the 8-1 cutoff pathway, right? So 8-1, August 1st, essentially, once we get to anything in August or September is the start of that season. So anything after 8-1, so for this year's current rankings, 8-1 2025, it goes through the fall, through the winter, into 2026, and it goes all the way into the summer, which a lot of our organizers' big events are, at the end of the summer for the 8-1 cutoff, timeline. It'll go all the way. So it is year round, right? Unlike 7-on-7 where it's just the first half of the year. 8-1 is year round. After 8-1 2025, all the way into July, and then we will be able to announce our winners. The 1-1 cutoff, we're actually not starting it right after 1-1. Several of our big users and groups host their championships early in the following year, right? So, a lot of you just saw the World Championships or the iFlag Championships that happened in January and February, right? Those were the championships for those organizations' last year circuit, right? They had the year-long circuit, everyone dumped into those big events, and then that was essentially their national or world championship. Otis, I want to have you explain to the audience, what is accounted into the algorithm that you built for this platform?
So basically there's, I guess 3 main things. First one is how well you do at a tournament. Then we care about how good, how much strength was in that tournament, and then your roster consistency. So I think the big part is that how well you do at a tournament, right? Because we want to find a way to quantify that without, while taking into account the fact that, a really, really strong team going to a really weak tournament shouldn't get as many points as a weak team going to a strong tournament and doing well, right? And so in order to do this, we use a modify ELO system, and we have to modify it because we don't want teams to lose points. But we also don't want teams that are expected to do well to run away with it. So just briefly what an ELO system is what it does is it finds the expected value of winning. So basically your chances of winning. We modified it so that it's able to find your expected placement at a tournament. And it does that expected value by comparing your strength to the strength of the overall tournament, right? And so what it does is it's an exponential function. It's an annoying function to deal with, but basically what it does is it's able to find, assuming a normal distribution, it's able to find the expectation for you, for how well you're going to do. Out of 100 tournaments, we expect that on average you'll get 5th place at this one, right? If we were to run it all a bunch of times. And so then if you get exactly what we expect, a normal elo system would say, cool, you do what we expect, we'll give you a few points, but mostly you'll stay the same. But because we want teams to always be gaining points, what we do is that if you do what we expect, basically then we're able to give you an average so that you stay with inflation. But if you do worse than we expect, we're able to give you a little bit below so that you still gain points, but you fall with inflation. And so what this does is it's able to both, reward teams regardless of, if they do well or don't, you still earn points. But if you do really poorly, it's basically as if you didn't go to the tournament. It's the same thing as, if I were to not go, right, I earn no points. But if I go, I earn very few. So you get a little bit more than if you didn't go, but you get very few points. And then the other main bit that I want to speak on is how we actually award, placement. So I already talked about how we do your expected value. And then what we do is we take that difference between your expected value and your actual result. We take that difference and then we basically put it on a graph. And this graph, basically what it's supposed to do is it finds out how much we want to weight you depending on how well you did, right? So like if you're first place, that should matter more than being fifth place. And the difference from first and second should be more than the difference from fifth to sixth, because to get first, you had to beat a really strong team, with the second best team at that tournament. To get fifth, you didn't have to beat the second best team at that tournament. And so we want to make sure there's a difference there. And so then the math we actually used, it was a combination of some logarithms. I think it was some natural logs with some, the original function we had to inverse it because we wanted to have a little bit of a concave, or we were able to switch it from being concave to convex, and switching that, we were able to get a graph that we felt made sense. And then there was a lot of tweaking. Actually, me, Matt, and some other parts of the team, we had a call where I was just going through changing some parameters in the function, and Matt and others were saying, oh no, yeah, this makes sense for what it spit out for the points for last year versus this didn't. And using that, we were able to land on a system that we think works. We were able to tune the parameters to values that we all felt comfortable with and felt like it actually represented how well teams did. And combining those parameters and that function with the modified ELO system, we're able to get how many points we would give a team at a tournament, assuming that they had 100% roster consistency. Now that's the other thing. If you change your roster, you get less points. Changing it by a little bit doesn't matter that much. Changing it by a lot matters. And one thing I want to know on the change is if what we call as a new player is a player that's been to less than half of your team's events, right? So if I have 12 players who go to the first event and then one of them drops out for the second and then everyone's back for the third, they're not a new player. We know that they had been to 50% of the events beforehand, right. So we're like, okay, cool, they just got sick, whatever, that's fine. If they're completely new or they've only been to a few, then they're still a new player. But just one new player doesn't matter that much. Having a lot, that's more of a problem. The more new players you have, it ends up impacting you more and more. The rate of impact increases as it's larger. And at some point, as you get to like 50% new players, your points get reduced by a large amount because it's just not the same team. We'll count them together, but it's very different. And so we don't want to award you as many points as if you had used the same team, right? Because teams that consistently win with the same roster, they should be rewarded more than teams that constantly switch and might use completely different players throughout the whole season.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's also, I know you worked on a new upgrade, which more and more of our event hosts are doing, and that is the multi-brackets within a division, right? So there are 24 teams in an event, and the organizer does an A, B, and C, right? And breaks the top 8 after pool play into bracket A, the middle 8 and B, and the bottom 8 and C, right? With the new updates, it is now counting them. The winner of the B bracket is technically 9th place in the overall event, right? So that's a new feature and upgrade too, because we know a lot of our events host we're doing, part of the growth is offering more and more brackets, right? We're giving the opportunity for the top-notch teams that are on site, and we're also, giving the newcomers, or they're newer into the game, an opportunity to, succeed at an individual event, but we need to rank them appropriately where they actually finished in that overall division. So that's just another point, event hosts, if you are building out multi-brackets within a division, it will now calculate that exactly how it should. So that was another upgrade that we're really excited to have for this year. We talked a lot about the points, the power in the global power index. We've talked about some of the common questions, that are coming into the system. We played in 4 events, but it says we're only recording 3. What would be the best way to, how do we look into that, right? When these questions come into our help desk or customer service, department, which we are, by the way, addressing, these emails. I believe we're now under 5-minute response time. Yeah. Shout out to our customer service team for that. And the number of DMs that, I know we get on social media are probably more in a day than most sports organizations get in a week.
Oh yeah.
So it's all and it's all thanks to you. You, the community, the users who are constantly posting events, constantly attending events, paying attention to the ranking system, liking and commenting on the graphics, and we know that not everyone is always going to agree with the ranking, but there's one thing we can say. I mean, you can't not agree with the way you've built Zorts points. It may not be what some may like or agree with, but it's factual data based on the events on our platform. Right?
Yeah, and what's nice is that we're able to do it algorithmically, and so it's factual, but it still leaves room for making improvements in future years. As people comment and as you guys engage, it gives me and the team more information to think about. That's a fair point that we didn't take into account, or maybe that we want to consider for improving next year. And the reason we're able to do that is because all of you are so committed and care so much, and it's such a strong community. I don't come from football, I come from volleyball and soccer, but after going to my first tournament here, I was amazed by how just beautiful it is, and how amazing it is to be out there and see everyone playing and seeing the engagement. And I know that we just want to create a system that works best for you, and getting your genuine feedback. I think there's one comment I saw that made me really happy. There's someone saying that despite them not being number 1, they said, yeah, I'm annoyed that we're number 7, but it's fair that we are. I understand why, and I'm excited to move forward and be number 1 next week. And that just makes me happy, because I wanted to make a system that makes sense to you guys and works for all of you. And I'm excited that it seems like it's working, and we're also trying to find ways to make it work better in the future, because we always know that there's ways to help the community more, and there's ways to be better parts.
Absolutely. And we'll continue to improve and update the system, as we move on and as we move into the next cycle, for each pathway. With what we've built, there will never not be a time where we don't have rankings going on at one point moving forward.
Yeah.
So there'll always be something, whether it's the 8-1, 1-1, or 7-on-7 going on. More divisions could be added. I know we got to see a lot of the pictures of the last year's teams, those gold trophies. They are a very popular award that I know the users appreciate in the community. So that's what you're fighting for, and that's why you're going to Zorts certified events that use Zorts IDs, and you're going to continue to follow that pathway to get ranked higher and higher. So some of the other, as you have questions, please send them in to our help desk, because it could be very useful to add them to our FAQs on the website, right? For the future. We do get a lot of emails in a day, and some of them, are, do need an immediate response, and others, we take as a suggestion, and we can build it into the FAQs as we continue to build the system out. But I'm really happy with what you have created so far. It's created a lot of buzz and excitement in the community, and we know people are following it just because of the traction that we can see on social. So I would continue to pay attention to it. Our global power index will be coming out once a month for each of the pathways, which again won't be a direct reflection of points. I would say it'll probably be rare that the monthly global power index will reflect the exact 1 through 10 of Zorts points.
Yeah.
It almost shouldn't.
It'll probably be similar, but not exact.
Right. You'll see a lot of familiar names, in the mix of things, but they could be assigned, at a different level of rank. Pay attention to those, and don't be discouraged if you were in the top 10 of the Zorts points and you drop out of the global power index, but keep attending events on the platform, and keep try to keep your roster as consistent as you can, right? You're always going to need to add new players, or players move into the area, or certain players are available for a certain event, but that will change ultimately. The more you do it, it could change the weighted point total being, accrued, with your team. So
yeah. And one thing I also just wanted to know is, I think that the trophy at the end of the year, the Gould Trophy, it's very aptly named, because it's actually it's named after a physicist who was my professor freshman year at college, and he's the one who taught me how to do a lot of this algorithmic stuff, how to build systems that work for people. And what I love is his favorite students were always those that started with physics and found other ways to pursue their passions. And I think that that's representative of this trophy. It's able to take into account, bring a physics component to it, and with that algorithm, but it also takes into account that part that Professor Gould loved, that subjectivity, the part that takes into account, more of the other fields, and thinking about all the other things that math can't take into account. And that's why I'm so happy that we have, the Gould Trophy being represented by the Global Power Index, because it's not just the algorithm. It takes into account the math and the physics, as well as the human eye, because there's something that that Matt and others can see in football that just my math can't pick out, because it's that human element that's so incredibly important, and that makes this sport fascinating and wonderful, and a joy to be a part of.
So sports, physics, we're here at Zorts Sports Studio, talking the combination of both. I'm just very grateful that we have someone like you. Like you said, I can see how teams perform, but I don't know the way to implement the math into it to make it make sense, for an accurate ranking for our users. So very, very grateful to have you here with us, Otis. And, please, continue to go to our events on the Zorts platform, and continue to follow us on social, where we'll be posting updates and, different upgrades in the future, to our system. We know that, we've gotten some requests for, well, hey, I don't see my team on there. We've went to a couple tournaments. We are working towards releasing more and more teams, right? Eventually, I think we'll be at a place where we can just release every team in the system. So actually you can see, you could be 495th and go to a tournament and bump up 172 spots this week, right? Like, okay, now you're in the, 300s, but hey, you had big movement, so that incentivizes you to, hey, get out there and go to another one of these tournaments out there. There's so many different operators on the platform, so many different styles of tournament. We have tons of great users on the platform. Just really exciting, time in the football space, and it's only growing, and we'll continue to improve and continue to take your feedback and suggestions and rotate our panels with our great organizers out there, and the sky's the limit. So there are many different rankings out there, right? And some are subjective, but what we tried to really do here at Zorts is make our Zorts points, non-subjective, right? I mean, it is facts. It is, tell us a little bit about what Zorts points are.
Yeah, so basically, as Matt was saying, we want an objective way to compare teams across tournaments, right? Because there might be a team that is dominating on the East Coast and others dominating on the West Coast, and it's really hard to compare those two and see which one's better, especially just looking at individual tournaments. It's hard to compare a winner of one versus a winner of another, and so we wanted to find a way to take these tournaments and qualify them. Say, hey, this tournament's worth more points, and winning at this one matters so much more. And in order to do that, it required creating a system to track these teams and to track how much strength they have, for example. And so then what we were able to do is weight each tournament by how strong the competition is at that tournament. So at the beginning of the year, every tournament is effectively the same. It's just like if you go to a tournament and you face 10 people in Kansas or 10 people in California, we don't know anything about the teams. We're going to weight them all similarly. But if there's a few teams that start pulling ahead and start being really dominant, and then there's a new team that goes to a tournament with those teams and beats them, they should be awarded, because obviously that team is very good if they beat these other strong people, and we want to take that into account.
So it's essentially, as the system grows, as there's more tournaments and more users in the system, the algorithm really works even better.
Oh, yeah. The more data we have and the more we know about which teams are strong, we're then able to award other teams that are able to beat those strong teams, and we're able to, actually talk about how to compare these strong teams against each other. Because it's not just, you won a tournament and there happen to be other strong teams there. No, you as a strong team beat other really strong teams. That means that you're good. That means that you're better than those teams, and we want to make sure you're rewarded for that properly.
It also means that, while the size of tournament does matter, the later we get in the season, a smaller size tournament with lots of high-ranked teams could have a higher weight than a larger tournament with a lot of lower-ranked teams, right?
Yeah. So like if, there's 10 really strong teams going to a tournament of 100 people, and those 10 teams score in the top 10, well, we kind of expected that. If we thought you're going to win and then you won, good for you. But what we really care about is how those 10 teams place against each other. So if there's like a tournament of just those 10 teams, and we're able to look at that and see, oh wow, this team that we thought was 10, the 10th out of these teams actually won. Oh, we know they're incredibly good. We're going to award them a lot of points, and they'll get probably a similar amount of points as if they've won that 100-team tournament with those same 10 strong teams, because that's what we care about. If you're a strong team, we care about you beating other strong teams.
Now, can you ever lose points in this system that you've built, for us? Is there a way where you could earn points and then lose them later on, or would you can't lose points, you can only add points, it just weights it differently? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, you can't lose points. That's actually one of the struggles that we had in making this, is making sure that teams are always awarded points for going to events. You want to make sure that going to events is always a fun thing, that you're always able to get points, but you also want to make sure that teams are accurately awarded if they do perform an upset. If a team that we thought was weaker beats a stronger team, we want to make sure that weaker team is awarded. So you don't lose points, but if you go to an event and you underperform, you will lose points relative to other teams. Your standing relative to everyone else at the event will go down because you didn't do as well. The other teams might pass you by. And so this just means that you have to go to more tournaments and make sure that you prove, no, that one event, that was an upset. That we woke up late, we didn't eat food properly. I don't know, something happened, but we really do deserve to be a top-ranked team. And you go back to more events and prove that you are a top-ranked team, and that was just a fluke.
Yeah, so, obviously, the more events you go to, the more points you have a chance to earn. The size of these events do matter. The competitive nature of how many top-ranked teams from, last week's ranking are at the current event, all of that factors into the weighted point structure of how points are awarded to all these teams, right? And each of our three structures have Zorts points, right? So that's the difference right now from last year. I like to say, if you need to find a flag football event or a 7-on-7 event, you don't go to Google, you don't go to YouTube, you go right to Zorts. You go to our platform. It has so many events posted. You can click through our search feature and see all of the events. One very important thing is Zorts IDs, right?
Yeah.
If you are an event host and you are not using Zorts IDs or the player cards, you're not being counted in the rankings, right? Again, it's the same as you aren't on the Zorts platform, you don't exist. So without using Zorts IDs, not only can it help you with the smoothness of your check-in and registration for your event and identifying players, we have many organizers who are going even further with it and checking rosters right before semifinals or championship games. But you need the player IDs when you set up your tournament. So that's very important for all, admins and hosts to have that feature turned on. Another client, they have earned sponsorships through consistently being in a ranking, right? Like they have a contract with a sponsor, and if they are able to remain throughout the season, in the top 20 or highly ranked, that they'll receive funding for future years and future tournaments. So, many different organizers are able to utilize the rankings in different ways, but we know the rankings are important for many different individuals. Event hosts, when you are on our rankings, you now can use that as a promotional feature. Many others have their rankings, and that is great, but they are only focused on their brand or their organization. Where at Zorts, we have 300, 400 different event hosts that are on the system in the rankings right now. So use it as a promotional tool, like, hey, come get your team globally ranked right through Zorts. So hosts, remember, another way to promote on the Zorts platform, to the community is through our Tournament Tuesday promotions on Instagram. If you submit your flyer by Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern each week, we will feature your tournament flyer on our Instagram and promote your event for free. So Otis, why doesn't beating a higher ranked team automatically make you jump over them?
It's because you have to take into account, why that other team is ranked highly and the fact that there's some randomness to it, right? If there's a team that's played in 10 tournaments and they've been doing consistently well, and they went to a tournament and there was an upset, you as being them should get a lot of points for doing so. But in the same way that if I was the team that was ranked highly and I lost one time, I think it'd be unfair for me to, fall super far behind. I think there's still, a amount of history you have to take into account that they have been doing consistently. It's possible this is a fluke. It's possible, it's now something consistent. So we can't automatically, put you ahead of that team. But, if this starts to happen consistently, if you're consistently going to tournaments with this other team and doing better at them, eventually you will go above them. It just needs to be something consistent if we're going to make a big change. If you're already ranked super, super close, then yeah, beating them would very likely at least put you ahead of them. But if you're pretty far away, it'll take some time and some tournaments for you to catch up and beat them. There's actually an example with, one of my roommates, he helps coach a team, and they were in second place for a very, very long time because there was this one team that went to a massive tournament. It was ranked super highly. So it took them a long time to come up and beat them. But they consistently went out, consistently won tournaments, consistently performed, and eventually they were able to overtake them because we need that consistent proof that you are a better team in order to put you above them. Because we don't want the teams to be changing wildly if it's just a fluke. We want it to be accurate, and accuracy requires time, and it requires consistency, and it requires us to be conservative with the way that we handle points, especially with switching people around and switching around the rankings. We want it to be truthful, not just a reflection of this week, but a reflection of the whole season, a reflection of how they have been and how we expect them to continue to be.
Consistency seems to be a very important word in everything we're talking about. When we talk about roster consistency or consistency of where you are finishing in an event, right? I mean, you could be ranked highly without a tournament win. But if you continue to go to events and you continue to place in that top 4, that top 6, top 8 range, that could reward you highly because especially when you upset a team, like the upsets is a big factor as well. But, one thing I picked up on is consistency is of just major importance on so many levels. All right. Well, that wraps our session up for today. Thank you for joining us. And we hope that you now have some more knowledge on, the difference between the pathways and what Zorts points are compared to the Global Power Index. And hopefully we've addressed some of your questions. Feel free to reach out with any additional questions. But Matt Riemel, Otis Fisher signing off here at the Zorts Sports Studio.